Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on today. We're going to talk about jobs. What do you need to be ready for the next layer of jobs, level of jobs, group of jobs? So we'll talk about how to prepare people for that in the second hour. If you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw it in. And now let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one is from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, I had a stream Tuesday with capturing the slides directly and then picture-in-picture the speaker when the presenter was constantly turning around and pointing at the screen. So beside full screening the slides, which I did, what techniques have you found most effective?
I mean, what we try to do is get people to stop turning around. I mean, and that is a behavioral problem typically is, and it's not something that's easy for people to stop doing because they've been doing it, many people have been doing it for 20 or 30 years. So it's hard to get them to stop looking at it. The main thing you have to do is provide the tools that they need so that they don't have the temptation to turn around. And so that has to do with confidence monitoring. So you got to figure out how to put their display in front of them so that they can really see it. So they're more likely to look down or in a perfect world, look up. So where we like to put confidence monitors, big ones, is over the camera. So over the camera, under the camera, in the back of the room, wherever it is, so that they're tempted to look up at it. The other thing that, the reason we got into doing this is because once speakers get it, once one speaker uses it a lot, they all use it, and then they stop turning around. Because now they have something in front of them, and all that laser pointing and everything else is now doing stuff like this and pointing down. And what's interesting is the people who really like this are the financial people, because they have all those Excel files and they love circling groups of things. So it's just a matter of the part of it is training people, and the other part is to think about how do you build an environment that calls for a certain behavior. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, also, I've done a number of these, and I try my best not to rely on the picture-in-picture picture of the speaker. If there's any way I can arrange it so that I'm getting a full face feed, and I understand this problem of the speaker turning around to present something on a screen, but all I really want is the face, because in 99 times out of 100, I can get the deck later, and then as an editor, I have the cutaway possibilities to go to the slides whenever I need to, full screen, and then back to the presenter full screen. And should I choose to put them in a picture-in-picture, I can do that and control whether or not it's big enough to see their facial expressions or whatever. So in almost all cases, I try not to use a fed picture-in-picture, particularly these ones with little person. Sometimes you have to do it, but that's my preference.
Yeah, I mean, and some of this comes down to a slow campaign that I've engaged in quite a few times, which is that I remind people when they say they want picture-in-picture that nothing screams corporate presentation more than a picture-in-picture. That picture-in-picture is the ultimate. I am a corporate event, and so I just ask people, how often do you see that in broadcast? Not very often. You don't see a lot of people speaking in a corner. They just don't do that. And so if you want to be thinking, because a lot of people dream that their presentations are going to look like a broadcast, and so usually dropping that just small doses of that poison across the entire team slowly eliminates picture-in-picture over sometimes 6 months or a year. Go ahead, Bill.
And the one other thing is that the Zoom default picture-in-picture, at least the ones I've been recording off my Final Cut broadcast, is a little tiny thing way up in the corner. It's not entirely clear of the frame. It's like it hangs on outside. So one technique I use a lot is if I'm talking about something in the upper right-hand corner, I like to push to that, blow it up, and usually I have enough resolution to do that. But then I've got this bad little picture every time I go wide that's off-center because of that little frame. So I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, so we just try to find the ways we can cut back and forth. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York is up next, and he says, morning, guys. Has anyone had the chance to hook up a multicam setup using only Insta360s? And if so, what are the pros, cons, and so forth?
Go ahead, Mitch.
We were talking about this last night on After Hours, and I don't have one personally, but Tom indicated that he had that OBSBot adapter that has the two USB connection, the thing that Alex is, nope, he's holding up the 360s. But anyhow, until they have the ability to loop through the second USB to allow the computer to control it's going to be a problem getting the PTZ function to work unless you're running through like OBS or vMix, something of that nature.
Yeah, so these are, I got two of them. I'm probably going to get a third one. So this is the little Insta360 link that's being spoken about right now. And I have tested over the weekend, actually got a time to test both of them together. The app will see both of them separately. So basically you have a drop down in the app and you can just select, I don't know how many you can select, but at least two. So it just has a list. There's a couple drawbacks. One is that you can't change the name. So it's like some long, numbers, so whatever name you see at Insta360, you're stuck with that. So you have the name can't be changed. It does change. There's a hump where when you go between each one, it stops for a second and goes talks to the other one. So it's not a clean switch back and forth between the two of them while you're working. All your presets and settings for each camera appear to be independent. So it switches over and now it's in a different mode. So it does do that. Problem is if you were going to use it in a production, you want to have access to all those presets for all those cameras in real time, not I have to switch to another camera. So if you're using it slowly and you're not trying to really build a show, you could do it with the Insta360s, with the links. And so for some training for an overhead camera that you're mostly going to change the overhead camera, maybe make fine adjustments to yourself, I think it would work. If you're trying to actually build a show, you need to have those presets and you need to have those controls be a little more open. I think that the good news is for these to become more useful is just a software problem. It's not a hardware problem. So these are, I think that they're going to be pretty useful. You're right that you can't use them with an ATEM, but you can use them with many other things that would be web only: Keynote, Mimo Live, OBS, vMix. All of these things would be able to see those webcams and be able to cut between them quickly, but being able to actually control them, I don't know of an API yet for them. So it's hard to know what you could do through the software. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think the deal buster would be the 1 or 2 second delay when you're switching to control one of the cameras.
I don't think it's a deal buster. It just depends on how you're using it. I mean, if you're only making fine adjustments and you're mostly controlling one camera, because if you're doing a 3-camera shoot, you may only be doing, a very simple changes to those things while the person's talking. And maybe one of them is roaming around more often than others. But one's going to be on the person, another, like let's just say cooking. One's going to be on the person, one's going to be on the cutting board, one's going to be on the stove. And you're not going to move. I mean, I did those with Damiante without any movement, but it would have been nice to make little adjustments like, I want to go in a little bit for this shot. So, selecting that and tapping a preset that I know that I'm going to go to wouldn't be a horrible, experience for it. So I don't know if it's a deal buster, but it definitely is something that they need to. And again, what I want to do is be able to have, hopefully they just open it up as API, because people like us could write something for it that would be way better, to make that work. But I will say that there's still, for a webcam, this is the best one so far. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and he wants to talk about background holders. He says, I'm unlikely to be at my home studio when I really need one. What have you found to be the smallest, most portable backdrop holder?
Go ahead, Bill.
So there's a couple of different kinds. There are clip types that just go at the top of a portable background, and you can get them in both plastic and metal, and they're really pretty good. At least the good ones, I think, are really pretty good. There's another kind that I prefer if I'm taking a tripod or anything long on a shoot. There's a kind of a stick kind, and the advantage of that is that it usually has 2 rubber clips and you can be stretched out, sometimes a good distance, and that will provide you support on 2 parts. That I think is a little more stable in terms of being able to put it exactly where you want. But if you're really trying to be portable, the clip types that you put on a crossbar or some sort of overhead mounting that just holds the background is probably your best bet, because it's the most portable and most travelable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it depends on, how portable and how small it needs to be. I've used a lot of these many people make these like video studio backdrops that are like 10 foot by 12 foot. Those will all fit into a little bag that you can throw in the back of your car. And we've definitely taken those, and you can stretch them both to the poles that are going up and the pole that goes across, but all of it breaks down into almost nothing. And they're, $30 or $40. So as far as stretching something open to it, it's pretty portable. Go ahead, Jeff.
I guess the big question is why? That's the first question. The answer is like, why is it bad to see what's behind you? As I say this with a screen behind me hiding a bunch of junk in my office, but it's a little bit different.
It's I think that the thing that I've had, the issue that I've had with it has been, I go to a hotel and there's just weird stuff behind me. Like the hotel, whoever the interior designer was for the hotel, I had one, it was on the show. Someone goes back and there was like a woman dancing kind of in a weird way, behind me. And I was kind of like, I wouldn't want to be in a meeting that way. And until someone pointed it out right before the show, I hadn't really thought about it because it was just like, I just relate to things as when I go into hotels, I have a tendency to just relate to wall. I don't really look at what's on the walls. That there's a wall there. And so then I became more sensitive to it. I haven't taken my gray screen with me, but it sure did tempt me to. And so it's so I think that might be some of it. And I'm doing the same thing, Jeff. I'm not hiding any junk. I'm just hiding a big window. That'd be horribly hard for me to light if I didn't put something in front of it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, sometimes it's for aesthetics, but sometimes it's also for security. For example, here, that curtain over that shoulder is actually covering a whiteboard or parts of a whiteboard. And sometimes there's content on there from one of my client meetings that is proprietary and I don't want it to get out. So, there's a variety of reasons why you want to cover up the background, some of them very legitimate.
Yeah. So anyway, but I think that from a portable, the one I like the most, if you can fit it, is the one that I have here, which is, I've bought quite a few of these, and these are the they're now Manfrotto. They used to be Lastolite, but they're Manfrotto, and they're 6x7. They roll up into something that's about 3x3, like the burrito, or not a burrito, but the taco. We call it the gray taco. Anyway, so and we put those together. They have a little arm that fits on the top of a light stand that you put on, and they just snap to it, and it's really pretty great to put those up and take them down. So we've got a bunch of them. So we use them often. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Sean Dawn. How can I receive an SRT feed if I do not have network admin to get through the firewall?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Rendezvous mode would be one way. Or a server that flips it, basically. We use Sienna ourselves to do that quite often. So we send from caller to caller. So it's just a negotiation. It's actually not sending it. It's the direction you're sending things are completely different than just getting the connection. But getting the connection over Rendezvous is one way. It's actually not as simple as that. It's better to use a server. You can use something like Sienna's processing engine or the High Vision or a Nimble server for that matter too.
Good guy.
Yeah, High Vision gateway is what you can use up in the cloud. Like Jeff said, you can also use, if you can't pop open ports, like on this Shadow PC that I was playing with over the weekend, Chris Widener turned me on, you can't open up ports. So we use SRT mini server, which you can rent for like $30-40 a month. And that'll do that handshake and that turn. And then you can bring in SRT feeds. So SRT mini server, I'll put a link in the chat.
Next question.
Aaron Gencarelli in Flagstaff, Arizona is in with this, looking at a BergDog P120 or a Blackmagic Studio Camera 4K. It's for corporate AV meetings. I'd like to hear what the panelists think. Which one would suit live hybrids better as a second camera? Thoughts?
Good guy.
With the larger sensor on the Blackmagic, you're going to get a better cinematic look, but it just depends on how far back you are, because there's a 20x zoom on that 120. I'd also be looking at the one that I have behind me, which is the P200. So it's got the 30 along with the full NDI. And that's the nice thing about the BergDogs is it's full NDI. So it just depends also on your workflow. That P120 also has the USB out, which is nice if you want to do some things like pop it right into Zoom and have far end control. So it just depends on your operator, who's going to operate it. And then again, what lens you're going to get, because if it's a total package price, where do you land with that camera fully loaded with everything? And then operator daily, who's going to run it?
Go, Jeff. I can't hear you, Jeff.
I'm just quieter on this side than I usually am. I'm a big fan of PTZs myself. And so if there's ever a chance that I could put a PTZ in a position that has a camera, I'm going to put it there just for that one time that I need to just slightly move it and not have to send somebody there to physically move it. So I would go with that, but I would lean away from the 120. I would lean towards the new 200 series versus if you're wanting to stay in BergDog, if you need an NDI workflow or just happen to like the price point that they're at. I tend to go more Panasonic myself.
Yeah, I think that definitely if you need the reach, so look at how big your rooms are. Is this a corporate conference room, or is it a large room? Large room that you have to put in the back, or you're going to have to do a little bit of both. I can tell you that a bunch of us are swarming on the just waiting for Sony to release the FR7. Like I'm trying to pre-order 4 of them. So for the kind of stuff we do now, we don't have to throw very far. So, our throws are, typically not more than 20 feet. So you just have to decide that's about as far as you're going to be able to get a good shot. So you have to kind of keep in mind the size of the camera, but it's a full frame sensor with a PTZ. So, but I definitely agree with both Guy and Jeff that PTZs are the way to go. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, comes up with the 11-inch and 12.9-inch iPad Pros feature an M2 chip, support for new Apple Pencil hover functionality, Wi-Fi 6E support, and ProRes video recording. Can you do a deep dive into the Pencil and ProRes features?
I think it's harder for us to do a deep dive because we haven't received any of them yet. So they're still there. And even I, after spending a whole bunch of money on other things, waiting for a little bit. I have to admit, the only thing that really interests me about the new iPad is the floating of the pencil, and whether it can be basically like an airbrush. Whether it gives kind of airbrush functionality that some of the Intuos Wacom tablets have. So that's the thing that I'm interested in. I don't know what would use the M2 like anytime right now. So my iPads feel like they go as fast as they need to go. I've got the last 2 years worth of them. So I think partially I'm not necessarily the target audience because I already have the last 2 generations. Usually I keep up with these because of the show I'm on, but it's a little, like the ProRes video is great, but it's got not the same camera system as the phone. So if without that camera system, it doesn't seem like it's worth doing. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I don't think Apple are looking for you to go from the M1 MacBook Pro, iPad Pro to the M2. At least they're not looking for me. And if they were, they should have done a much better job of explaining why. And I think probably for that Pro, they're going to start spinning that the same way they spin the phones. And the year-to-year comparison isn't meaningful always.
Yeah, and I think that the TikTok right now is really complex, because the Air or the new iPads have different features than the iPad Pros. Like the camera in the middle of the screen makes a big difference, but it's not in the new form factor. So it's a very odd way to kind of approach a release schedule. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, Apple is doing a lot of work in integrating and automating the Pencil into some of their workflows. I'm using it a good little bit with Keynote these days. And if I have something like this, the fact that I can highlight a particular blue thing out of the others, and that's just one of the things. I mean, along with the drawing capabilities. And the thing that impresses me about it is not so much that you can do these things. A lot of packages can do these things, but they've integrated it so well. I don't have to do anything other than launch Keynote. And then I went into presentation mode and I could see the 2-up. If I tap on any of the ones I can see, it'll pop up and invoke the Pencil, and it just makes it easier. But
that's been around for the last at least 2 or 3 generations. So, I mean, or more 4 or 5 generations. So that's the thing is that I guess when we look at the new ones coming out, the hover is the thing that I'm interested in, but not because I want it to show me where I'm at before I touch it. It's because I really want to be able to do airbrush. I don't want to do airbrush. I think that people want to do it. Airbrushing is a really powerful tool when it comes to doing texture mapping. So if I want to do something, I want it to be soft, and I want to be able to control how hard it is by how close I am to the surface. There's a lot of people who do that, who rely on that. When you're actually texturing. Next question.
Aaron Gicarelli is back with this one. I had a panelist come in via Zoom that sounded echoey when they plugged in. Their headphone with microphone or whatever they were using sounded like they were underwater when they unplugged their microphone and used the onboard laptop mic. Any idea why?
I looked at this question earlier today, and I can't quite figure out what happened there. It sounds like they didn't have their headphones on. So you might have been hearing a return because they were just open speakers at that point with the microphone. And so I that's the only thing I could kind of figure out. The other thing that I was wondering about is whether somehow there was a in their connection, things got reversed. Like they didn't push something in all the way, and it was actually using their headphones as microphones, which will actually work. But if you put your headphones on and then you use them, you would sound exactly like that. I can't quite understand what actually was. You might have to ask that again. We can't quite figure out what that is. So I'm gonna think about that one. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener again in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, do we know what time iPad OS 16 will be released today?
No idea. but sometime today, hopefully. So it should be interesting to see how it goes. Next question.
Aaron is right back. Aaron G. Corelli of Flagstaff. ATEM Extreme ISO will start recording to the drive, but will not stop recording. Use the same drive that worked many times, but now the only way to stop it is to unplug the USB drive from ISO. Tried rebooting the ISO and reformatting the drive? Any other ideas?
Go ahead, John.
What I saw online was some people having the same trouble with drives that they used before. They changed the streaming quality to a lower amount, and then that allowed them to start and stop. It seems like a issue with the performance of the drive that is causing the ATEM to be overloaded, and then not to stop the recording until you unplug it or restart the ATEM.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what drive you're using, for that. So it may have worked in the past, but you may be doing something different with it. I'd be interested to know if it was a T7. so that would be the one that I would worry about the most. It would be interesting to know if you can ask another question where you tell us what drive it was. We might be able to be more helpful. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. As Zoom moves toward professional capabilities for production, such as Zoom ISO, can we see them adding the ability for admins to see what default camera and or audio input is being used by participants, as well as remotely change it?
Go ahead, John.
Well, today, using the Zoom dashboard, you can see what camera and video that someone is using. The ability to remotely change it, I don't know what security concerns there could be there, but definitely something that would be interesting to be able to take over. There are different products that do offer that if you're doing like streaming that allow you to select a device for the client and as well as ISO record and get it over to you. But having that in Zoom would be a nice feature.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, John's right. In the dashboard, you can see, I believe it's only people in your org, though. You can see not only their camera, their specific camera that the system sees. So if it says Brio, it'll actually tell the full meal deal. And then it'll actually tell the audio interface as well. In order to switch those cameras, if there is multiple inputs, if the meeting is set up with far end control available, you can, when you go to request camera control, there is a little button down in the bottom right that'll say, switch camera, so you can cycle through all their cameras. And somebody like me, if you hit mine like that, it'll cycle through like 9 cameras because there's so many NDI feeds and other feeds in my system. So you got to be careful because it goes all the way to the bottom, then goes all the way to the top. So if you're looking for a certain camera, it could be a hunt to get to it.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is going to be possible is as we start looking at Zoom apps, these are going to be apps that are sitting next to it. I'm not sure how they're sandboxed, but that's going to be another possibility, that's there. And again, when we get to a point where we want to control the camera, we start thinking about we want to send a computer. And once we send a computer, we're going to have control over it. So, if it's at a level that we want to say we absolutely want to use this camera throughout this thing, and we don't think the person has the technical capability of doing it, what we tend to do is send computers, with it, Mac Minis. Typically to make that work. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says, I've got a LiveView Solo Plus and haven't been able to get LiveView Reliable Transport to successfully work through a full stream. Has anyone else had this issue? It starts bonding and then dies with 0 kilobits per second.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry. Yes, we've seen that before, and it was always something in the configuration, but it wasn't with Solo. It was with one of our bigger units, and it was a quick call to LiveView, and it was fixed within minutes after we got a hold of them. So it's something of how their backend is set up and how your account is going through. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit harder to get hold of somebody with the Solo. That's not part of their support. So get a hold of Dan. If you're on part of the Facebook group, the solo group, that's a great way. He hangs out there all the time, and be glad to help you.
Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware says, Mickey and Tom helped me try a better camera grade on my Sony FX3 last night on After Hours. What do you think?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I had the ISO set too high, and then the shutter speed was the wrong speed. So we monkeyed around with it, and I think it's clear, but I want to hear what you guys think.
I think it looks better. Yeah. I think it's a subtle improvement because it already looked pretty good, but I think that it looks a little bit more natural. So I think it's an improvement. Good work. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Have any of you used Aphex Aural Exciter? And he's got the link there to increase speech intelligibility.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. Aural Exciter is probably the original Aphex effect. In fact, if you go back to the history of what the Aural Exciter was, I'll make it real quick. It was actually a mistake that the original inventor found when he was building a Heathkit. And what it basically is it creates multiple harmonics in upper presence range frequencies, but they're musical in nature, so they're not necessarily objectionable. But the problem with it is it's adding something that doesn't exist. And I think that used in small amounts by professional mixers makes sense. But the minute they started putting Aural Exciters on prosumer and customer-level devices, it started being abused. I have it on my Aphex. It is bypassed. And it, in my opinion, maybe just a tiny bit, but for the most part, I could do without it. And then the other problem is there's another plugin that works with it. It's called Big Bottom that Aphex has, and it's trying to add bottom where you don't have it. And again, my point is that if you're trying to sound like James Earl Jones or Courtney, you're not going to sound like him no matter how many plugins you apply. So don't like it.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I prefer to use traditional EQ for that sort of thing. However, I will say the Aural Exciter stuff works really well in music production on specific instruments. So sometimes it can be either the Big Bottom or the Aural Exciter can add character to something of an instrument, like maybe adding it on a bass or something like that, where you want it to kind of be a little bit more snappy sounding. So in music production, I see people using it more often there, not necessarily post-production.
Next question.
Paul Valus, Austin, Texas asks, why didn't Apple add MagSafe to their new iPad Pro? Is it technically even possible? What are some of the coolest accessories to go with MagSafe? And just what is MagSafe?
Go ahead, Nigel.
I'm not sure I can answer MagSafe technically, other than it's a magnetic way of connecting your power, but I would think that Apple is looking actually to go the other way and work out how to get rid of all connectors from things like iPads, and looking through different techniques, the same the way they have done with the iPhone. And if you think of devices like iPort, which allow you to dock your iPad, I think rather than go MagSafe, they'd probably rather get rid of the power altogether.
Go ahead, Bill.
I agree, actually, with everything Nigel just said. The most number of iPads in service, I'm going to bet, is as point-of-sale terminals basically in retail. I go to so many stores now, and each of the salespeople have an iPad, and they're entering and reacting to and signing you up for things. If you go into the Apple store, they use them almost exclusively for every bit of I/O that happens with the store computers. And so I think they think of this device as something that you're going to carry with you and hold on to. It's not a desktop device where MagSafe makes sense. The MagSafe solution is a magnetic power connection so that if you accidentally run into it, it doesn't pull your machine down off there. And if you're using something portably in your hand, that's not a consideration.
Go ahead, John.
When you're using the Magic Keyboard from them, essentially that is what you're getting. So you're able to dock the iPad into that. It's going to pass power and data through that port. Which is definitely useful to, I use it all the time for what I use the iPads for. If I need to get power, if I need to get anything else going, I can just drop it right in that dock.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, Bill just prompted me to say that I was at a Formula One race over the weekend with 140,000 of my closest friends, and every single one of the retail point of sale pieces was an iPad mini with a square on it. And that's how they did all of the retail for the whole of all the food, all the concessions. And now, if they had a network that supported it, would have helped. But that's the power, I think, of that.
Yeah, and I think data transfer for most of these things, it's really hard to get past especially now that we're at USB-C. USB-C speeds is hard if you're going to use it for a pro solution. So I think that's going to be, not only power, but getting that data is going to be really important. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. And Douglas says, it has been rumored that the second mic in the Biden administration presidential kit is a Schoeps capsule in a Shure SM57 shell. If that is true, why could that be, and how would it be done?
And as a note, we've got a great panel here. We're going to end up going to the second hour early if we don't get more questions, and that's totally up to you as the producers. But we're cutting through these really, really fast. So if you've got questions, this is a great morning to add them. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Douglas, I've heard the same rumor that the Schoeps would be put in there. The only reason to use a Schoep, whether you're disguising it or not, is it is a much cleaner microphone for pickup, and it's loud. It's very able to increase volume. So the plausibility part of that rumor comes into play when you consider that the president in Joe Biden, he's not much of an orator. He's a quiet-spoken man. So having a Schoeps in there, even if it is disguised to look like an American-made microphone, tends to increase his intelligibility, which is a wonderful thing.
Good, Bill.
Also, they've been using that dual rig SM57 mic mount for presidential addresses really for about 50 years now. And those are not run by the audio department. They are run by the Secret Service, because obviously you want complete control over everything that is near the president's head at all times. So those, I'm sure, go in a case with a Secret Service agent, and nobody gets anywhere close to them as they're setting up all these remote things. So I don't think it's there so much for the audio functions, because the 57 is a great mic, don't get me wrong, but it's not the best possible. So I can see them wanting additional clarity and additional noise reduction and just switching out the capsules so that everything else, all the cases that they put them in and everything else remains exactly the same.
I think it's the Air Force, actually.
Oh, is it the Air Force?
Does the mics. So anyway, I do think it's probably just not to look ostentatious, but still have the quality that they needed. I think that's probably the reason that they're doing that. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, up again. This time he says, what's the latest news about the wise treasure hunt that Preto, Jonas, and Guy are hot on the trail of? And what is today's new clue? And he's got that listed in here.
Go ahead, John.
Well, this is not a popular question. The one thing that I'm enthralled with is basically a publicity stunt, and they're getting good publicity. Today is their 5th year anniversary, and they're releasing a new product. And this whole hunt was promotion for their new product that's coming out today.
So they have the product somewhere, and you have to find it. Is that the
They've buried a camera in Washington over by Guy, and if you find it, you get $10,000.
I just thought you get the camera. Okay, all right.
They get one. You get one of every one of their products in addition to the money.
Oh, that's great. Nigel?
There is something uniquely office hours about this, that so far the team have spent $20,000 of hours and time. They've hired people. They've done it. They've got keyhole satellites working.
We need a helicopter, Nigel.
Yeah, they've spent 10 times more money trying to find this thing than it's worth, because of the joy of the technology. And I think it's been fun to watch. I'll also in the chat leave a link to the very famous Masquerade treasure hunt that ended in tears and lawsuits and threats. So something to look forward to there, John.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, the whole idea that people are wandering around in the Pacific Northwest digging holes in people's private property and yards is considerable. And as Nigel just said, the amount of time being, I don't know if wasted, unless the outcome is good for them, is distracting, because isn't it true that they have zoologists analyzing the creatures that occasionally walk through the scene in order to try to narrow down the habitat? It's kind of a funny thing, but I think it distracts from the camera's capabilities. Cameras aren't supposed to make you money that way.
I think it's great. I think finding some way to get people involved in it and giving them an outcome to put out, to do something that's a little bit out of the box, I think it's a lot of fun. Next question.
Gordon Lake, Los Angeles. On a 10-hour shoot day with no catering and a walkaway lunch, what represents good craft services?
I guess it's, and I'm assuming that it's saying no catering and I'm assuming and no walkaway lunch, which is, I don't know how many times someone's going to get people to show up if they do no 10-hour day with no catering and no walkaway lunch. All I'll say is that the one rule about production is that you feed the crew, even if they're all volunteering, you feed the crew. Like that's the key to that's Mitchell.
Yeah, I guarantee you the conversation among the crew, if the food has been cheaped out on, like pizza or finger sandwiches or hamburgers from a local fast food place, it's going to be the only thing they can talk about. They're going to be concerned with their stomachs and not what's going on the shoot. At the very least, if they get stuck and they can't do decent craft services, a reasonable per diem is good. But then again, you don't want people leaving the set.
You go, John.
Shout out to Eric Price, the producer on Office Hours, who drove out here from Kansas to do the Office Hours catering, craft services. It was absolutely spectacular. He spent weeks planning food allergies to ensure that everybody was fed on in the middle of the desert. So it was fantastic.
Yeah. What I will say is that, I can't say that we always have the nicest, catering. We do the best we can with those types of things. We found some pretty good places that we oftentimes go. And we, try to have both protein, some nuts and a lot of nuts. We do put out some, I've eased up some of my rules, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea. We used to not ever put candy out until after 4 p.m., but it's been out more often recently. I just noticed in one of our shoots. I was in shoots all last week, so it's fresh in my mind. We do try to take people's orders. We have a couple places that we go. DoorDash has become very popular for us in those types of things. But we take orders from good places, like so that people can get salads and sandwiches and whatever they want, as opposed to just what we found was what was hard was to cater something, having someone doing hot cooked stuff, and then this person's vegetarian, that person's gluten free, and this person is. It's easier to order from somewhere to have that done. For breakfasts, my favorite breakfast personally is Starbucks. So I really like the Impossible Burgers. I've become quite obsessed with the Impossible Burgers, which I didn't think I'd like. I actually got introduced to them in Frisco. I was doing some work there, and in Frisco, Texas, so which was an odd place to learn about an Impossible Burger. Anyway, so I think that having stuff around that people can grab, nuts, jerky, some breads or muffins or something around in the morning and something else in the afternoon makes a difference. Definitely having water is important, and coffee. Like definitely having coffee. Don't bother with I have to admit, I don't bother with decaffeinated coffee. I mean, because no one on a set really cares about, they don't even care about the temperature most of the time. We try to keep it hot, but what they care about is that there's caffeine in it because they're working and they're trying to keep up. So make sure that you have coffee all the time. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Chipotle.
Yeah, we had some trouble with Chipotle, but Rustic Bakery here in the Bay Area is something we JJ mentioned in there. It's they great salads, but we've had some issues with the Chipotle delivery process, and so we was oftentimes getting things that were mismatched. So we did use Chipotle for a while, and then we had enough problems with it that we stopped using Chipotle. so it was, but we were doing it all the time. So we had a high sample rate. And then we have a burrito places nearby, but I try to only do burritos now at dinner because crews are much less effective after they have the burritos that are near. There's just too much. A big burrito is good to give people dinner when they only have an hour or two of work to do, but not good at lunch because they'll fade by 4. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He says, has anyone used the rat hitch-mounted vehicle mast before? He's got a link there. And if so, thoughts?
It looks cool. I went and checked it out while we were going through it. It looks like a cool apparatus. Go ahead, Jeff.
It's not that exact model, but we had a local television station that had something very similar on the back of one of their small SUVs. There's 4 or 5 different manufacturers out there, but this one I like myself. Actually, it'd be great to put a Starlink on the top of to get it up over trees whenever you want to get the best signal possible. That was one thing I was thinking, the high shot to have for beauty shots and stuff. We have some stands that go 30 feet in the air, but they're about 85 pounds. So they're a little bit more than just a single person lift to get in sight and get them up in the air. They kind of wiggle around a little bit. So it'd be interesting to me. It says a 45-pound capacity, which I think as a possible option. I think that's really high. Thinking 45 pounds is a lot of weight to put up in the top of a pole and be stable. So if you're using it for cameras, that would be the thing. We actually had our stands adjusted from a 35-foot length down to, it's 28, 30, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly. But we took out a section. And we're, being from Texas, we use end zone poles is what they're most of the time called around here. And so all our football teams have them. And they're basically put up at the end zones to get a high wide shot for the players and for the game tapes. And there's a company over in Sealy, Texas that makes them. And so we went over and worked with them. We put our cameras on theirs and really came down to it. But Chris, I'd be worried about putting much more than just a light PTZ up there. Our camera kits are considerably heavier for our broadcast cameras, but a light PTZ might be okay to move around.
Good, Bill.
Exactly what Jeff said. Every time I've used a tall mast, if I didn't put some sort of guy wires on it and stake it down, I get so much wind, just instability. If you're really lucky and get a completely calm day, they can be fine. But anytime the wind gets above 5 or 6 miles an hour, unless you've got almost nothing up on the top of them, they do move around and you get kind of a shaky-ish looking shot.
Next question.
Next one from Josh Kaufman at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Josh said, Intel Arc GPUs reportedly are the best AV1 encoders offered by dedicated hardware and the most cost-effective. Would it make sense to use a pair for building custom encode-decode rigs?
Go ahead, John.
For decode, it's not really necessary. Any high-end CPU can handle that as fast as you're going to throw the video at it. For encode, an A380 is definitely going to be a great option. Looking forward to seeing when YouTube and Twitch and all these other platform providers allow AV1 encoding. It should be a big change of what kind of quality bandwidth we can get out of 1080p streams, especially with Twitch having the 6 megabit limit.
Yeah, given the number and quality of encoder decoders for point-to-point building, I'd be hesitant to build a custom one. Like just I would say, like it's a lot of work, and to keep up with it, there's a big business doing that right now, and I would stick with the ones that are already established. Next question.
JB Windle in Thailand comes to us and says, when using Zoom ISO with an HDMI workflow, does the panel still recommend the pluggable 4K DisplayPort adapter for the M1 Mac Mini? Any new products that have been found to work better?
Go ahead, John.
I've used the pluggable; they're great. I would recommend just stepping up to the Mac Studio. You're going to get a much better performance. It's going to leverage the GPU versus the CPU, and then you're just not going to be relying on those adapters. You can go right USB-C to HDMI into, and then you'll probably be in a much better position.
Good, Mitchell.
Doesn't the M1 only allow 2 monitors connected to it, even if it is a DisplayPort?
You can get the pluggables to go further than that. Yeah, I'm testing right now the Mini Extreme SDI ISO along with a Sonnet card and a quad output, and I would just use that. It works so well. The quality of the SDI coming out, in my opinion, and it appears that there's the draw on the computer is lower. The quality is higher than NDI. The draw on the for the SDI to go out, because the way that ISO is pushing out of the hardware. So you actually get higher quality and a higher frame rate at a lower CPU hit as SDI output than any of the other options. So in a high density. So you're looking at less than 50% CPU for 8 outputs, coming out of the Mini, and it's working really, really well. So I would really think about, if I was building something that needed more than a couple, to just go to what works in that area. And then you have to decide whether you need an interface or not. So the advantage of the Extreme SDI is that it will record all those ISOs, and you have an interface for it. So you can record and you have something to tap on. If you don't need that, then probably the 2ME, the new 2ME HD is probably all you need to make all of that work. Now, next question.
Bill Hops in San Jose, California is up next. He says, using Zoom ISO V2, is HD quality determined by the host account, the Zoom ISO V2 account you log in with, or something else? Thanks.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, with Zoom, it's always whoever hosts the account. So if somebody has a 720 or a 1080p enabled account, that is what the meeting will be. If they do not, if they have a 360p normal account, you can use something like a portal or a Zoom room to bump it up. I haven't checked to see if Zoom ISO will do the bump or to see if you can pull anything bigger, but it's always the host account. So you have to have a pro account or reach out to support to enable your account to get the higher resolution.
Good, Mitchell.
After doing a little research, found out that if you have a pro account, you can always ask for 720. You can make the case for 1080.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is back again. This time he asks, with the new Shadow Premium, what are people seeing with their benchmarks? Cinebench score of nearly 6,000 here.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I ran a test on Cinebench over the weekend with the new Shadow Premium. So with the old one, we were getting like really, really low scores. Looks like mine came in about the same as his, about 5,952. Typically with the 8X G4DNs on AWS, we're getting like 15,000. So big difference. One of the things I did, though, to burn it in was I ran vMix, I ran Livestream Studio and SRT Mini Server all at the same time over the weekend for 4 hours straight, and was able to push out a 4K stream. It's $50 a month, and it burned it. It ran for 4 hours straight, no hiccups. So pretty amazing that that's that cheap. I don't know how they do it.
That's great. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin says, what are your new favorite AI tools to help with production?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
My favorite, Mark Roberts' MHC chat, which is AI control of cameras. It's not technically AI, it's tracking, but it sort of is AI. That's a marketing term, more so than a lot of things. It doesn't actually have AI in it, but it does have a learning algorithm that they continually tweak, and it's doing fantastic for us. Spoken projects and stuff like that with talking heads or someone on a stage, it's amazing, just absolutely amazing, and it's really good in our sports also. It's game changing to change your workflow like that. It really is.
Yeah, I think the one that I probably use the most is captioning. So we use simonsays.ai fairly often to just get raw captures of everything, to do paper edits out of it. It's not perfectly accurate, but it does a pretty good job, and the timing is correct. So it's really easy for us to go back and fix. We also use it for languaging, and especially in real time. So we're also using a variety of the EEG/AI media tools to basically get one of the things that we have to do is sometimes translate something in real time live into 8, 10, sometimes 12 languages as captions. And some of those languages are not captionable. So like Mandarin, Hindi, a variety of those are not captionable, but the AI can do it in 708. So what we do is we can have one person typing. They type the English because that gives us a good start. And then we have the AI do the rest of it. so it's our tests have been fairly effective at doing that. It's never going to be right, but the reality is people complain about the translations no matter who does it. So I've kind of given up on that problem because it's the translations are a mess. They're never what people want when you're doing them live. And there's always going to be somebody calling in and complaining about it. So we've kind of given up trying to be perfect on it. And we just try to make sure that you get the gist. Next question.
Next question comes from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. And Todd asks, a few months ago, Jonas teased some new project he's working on to control Panasonic Lumix BGH1 cameras. Any update?
I know Jonas isn't here. I don't know what the update is. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know about Jonas's update. I don't want to speak for him. We have spoken about it. We do use the BGH ones ourselves for a lot of POV shots and great little cameras. Really highly recommend them. We're using Skorhoy tools to control them, paint them, and do everything we need. It's all over IP, so it's relatively seamless. And also using the Lumix Tether app, which comes with a camera, of course. It's free. But I'm always looking for better tools. But the Skorhoy control surfaces with the core is pretty powerful too.
Next question.
Guy Cochran comes to us next from Seattle, and here on the panel, what 2 new cameras did Panasonic announce?
Good, Guy.
Yeah, at the show, these are more on the high end, but the UE 150 is getting a replacement. It's the UE 160 now, and the UE 160 has a newer 1-inch sensor. It has newer motors. It also does 2110. It also has an XLR audio input. So on the back, this is the other one that got released. This is the PLV 100, and this is a PL mount camera, 2110, 35 millimeter sensor, and PL. Back to the UE 160 real quick. Here's that XLR audio input. There's an SFP module to do the 2110. There's also a 12G SDI out, 3G SDI, USB HDMI, and then NDI, of course, and SRT. So pretty sweet camera. These things are monstrous. So when you see them in real life, it looks small on this screen, but it's a big camera. And then back to the Cine Live, you could see that this is the new big bad boy that they'll be releasing. Price on both of these has not been disclosed yet, but these were just announced at NAB New York.
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Can't wait. Monorail and order. Can't wait. Those PTZs are just amazing. And for them to put 2110 capability in it is going to be game changing to integrate into a lot of different studio environments that are dead set that that's the way they want to go. It really is a great camera.
It'll be interesting to see how the PL mount goes. Most of us that are doing, live with cine lenses are we're really embedded into the Venice cameras because we can shade them and that we can also, they have the PLs, and that's what we've been using for a lot of the stuff that we're doing. The new Arri Super 35 is the one that I just finished a week of shooting with. We weren't shading it. We were doing Arri raw records. But those are the big game, or those two cameras in the world that I live in right now. That's pretty much all I'm using are one of those two cameras. And so it'll be interesting to see if Panasonic can wedge its way into that kind of PL world, because those have really become embedded in that system. The 150s are great. It'll be interesting with the new motors whether the accuracy of the telemetry is improved over the 150, which is already really good. But there's been a little bit of, sometimes when we have really slow moves on the 150s, we've had just a little bit of movement on the background. And so it'll be interesting to see if that gets locked up in the 160s. Next question.
Sean Dunn asked this one: how do you get people to pay you in a timely manner for small jobs? How long do you normally wait to be paid, and what is considered normal?
Go ahead, John.
Establishing your payment terms should be something that you do up front, so it's well understood exactly what you're going to do. I typically deal with next 60-day terms when I'm doing anything. I use FreshBooks. It allows me to just send reminders and tag people until I get paid, which is, making it easy for them to send you money is going to be the easiest way to get paid.
There you go, Bill.
Sometimes it's tougher on the small things than it is on the bigger. Most of the time when you're working with bigger corporate payment things, they have a system. Often you have to deal with their system. So if you want net 30, but they're net 60 to 90, and some of the biggest corporations I've worked with have been like that. Although I did have a change in heart. I was working for a government agency, and they said, we've changed. They're asking us to make small things, just put them on credit cards. And my contact there got a credit card. And so I ended up getting paid net now on those. As soon as I finished the work for them, she and I would get on the phone and she would pay me by credit card.
Was it sub $2,000?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm saying small jobs. If it's on small jobs, some of them don't want to deal with all the hassle of doing things like that. And so that caused me to think you could, if you're doing a digital delivery of something, easily figure out a way to put it behind a little, this payment or this work will be released to you when you give me the last three numbers of the credit card or the transaction where you paid for it. I mean, you have to think outside of the box. If you have a very small business and you're working on small margins with small numbers, getting paid is life critical for your business. So anything you can do.
Nigel.
Yes, first of all, make it really easy to pay you. The harder you make it to pay you, the less likely you are to get paid. Second thing is be really sensitive to use of credit cards. Anything over a certain amount, you will end up paying such large fees, it may not be worth it. Third thing is, if you're having to buy something, then you need to make sure you are paid up front before you buy it. I can tell you typically, even on fairly small jobs, we operate a 50-45-5, which is 50% deposit, 45% before we start the work, 5% when we've done it. But very hard to do with very small jobs. I get that. But if you've got a customer who doesn't want to pay you, then they're not a customer.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the bottom line has been, or especially when I was doing it with Pixel Core, is that if you're a new company and you were smaller than Fortune 100, like literally if you were any smaller than the Fortune 100, we expected an MSA. In addition to that, we expected 3 successful billing cycles in which you paid us upfront. So and then after that, we would start do terms. And corporations, we expected, we asked for 45. We didn't really start nagging people until we got to 90, just because it's a corporation and things take time and someone's out of town and someone's doing whatever. And if you start becoming someone who's nagging all the time, you just don't get called again. So the, if you don't want to be a problem for the finance department, because then they'll call and say, hey, don't do this, don't work with it. Because I know that people who nagged us, I'd get a ping from finance that said, don't hire them again. like they're pinging us at 31 days, and we're still waiting for payment. So those are the things that are, definitely hard to make that work. But yeah, not paying us on time, we would try to be as nice as we can because we want to keep on working with folks. And then we would just hand it off to finance and just say, go get it. We always got paid, so it was the brutality that, our finance department at Pixel Core would go into. Like, they would call people's bosses and then their bosses and then their bosses. And it was that was like, I don't want to work with that company again. So if I didn't get paid and I didn't want to get work with them, it would just ratchet up until I was tweeting about it. And usually that only had to happen once. So it just, but when you start deciding you're going to get the money, just remember that you're not going to work with that company again. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, up next with what activities and games particularly suited to virtual events that replace physical events? And he's thinking about receptions, anniversaries, company picnics, and so forth. What activities would take advantage of the digital and connected aspects of working virtually?
We don't have a lot of hands raised here. I can tell you that as someone who used to be a DJ, I tried to get rid of almost all of those events. So when I was actually at the events, I'm not a big event person. So I don't really like I didn't like most of them when they started. I mostly wanted to give people a place to, to me, it's how do we get people to be able to communicate and, authentically see each other and be around each other and have conversations and create flow of people talking to each other. But anything that, for the most part was, I think that the things that make a difference in anniversaries and receptions are slideshows. Slideshows are really popular. Slide/short movies and everything else of the history. People love that. So we have done a lot of those in those areas, and they work pretty well. Other things that we've done at receptions that have been, I've talked about it. We've done a couple of these in both the virtual world and the physical world that I think I've talked about before, but I just loved, was wine tasting with cheese tastings we did it once when we were physical and a couple times when it's virtual, where you're talking to the winery that makes the wine that you're tasting. You're eating the cheese that is made by somewhere in the world is made by that cheesemaker. And you're at this really high-end place and there's a big screen and you're talking to them. There's like 10 people that sit around the bar and they sip the wine and they talk about it and they go to another winery instantly, try something else. And they sit there and people, it just forms lines, so like little wine tastings and that type of thing was just unbelievably popular. And so I keep on looking back at, I should do more of that, but I haven't had the opportunity to. Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland's up next. Has anyone else experienced significant instability in recent days on Zoom 5.12.2 and OBS 28.0.2? I've restarted the programs and rebooted the i7 Intel MacBook Pro to no avail. Any suggestions for a fix?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a shield or something to hold up just so that nobody throws something at me for my answer on this one. But yeah, I wouldn't use OBS 28 on a Mac. It's just you're asking for trouble. Even 27, which I would back down to if it was more stable for you. I've had 28 beta on this Mac Mini M1, and it's been not so stable. So depending on what you're doing, what activity. So here's the flame part. That's an Intel machine. You could boot camp it and you could put a stable version of OBS. OBS runs great on the PC with Zoom. So that would be my answer. And I'm ducking, so no.
That's the answer. Go ahead, John.
The gentleman from Washington hit it out of the park. I have OBS 28 running on my PC for 3 weeks, solid as a rock. I can run it about 15 minutes on my Mac, Intel Mac, and it crashes the resources after 15 minutes. So Keenan and Fenwick have all gone back down to 27. So run a PC if you're going to run OBS.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're using OBS, they've all been pretty unstable all the way back to version 1 on the Mac. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Cedar Creek in Texas says, with advances in AI, is there any app on the platform, on any platform, that will recognize handwritten print?
Harshid?
We talked about these apps yesterday. Google Lookout, Assisted Vision, and Seeing AI both do hand recognition. And within those two ecosystems, they even offer that, I believe, with other means, like with Google Chrome extensions. So you might also check that out. And there are others, but it's a hit or miss. But those are two trusted ones.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine, back from Panama, says, what is the best way to get more clients on streaming services and production?
For what we've done in the past when we're talking to clients about it has always been just to remind them and show them. Every once in a while, you're sending them something like, hey, check this out. This is pretty cool. Hey, check this out. This is pretty cool. And talking about, thinking about how it would make a difference for them, and then looking for the opportunities where they don't have enough money or they don't have the structure to do what they want to do physically. And then you go, well, we could do this live, or we could do something like that. You don't want to become too much of it. We could do everything live. You really need to think about what does it solve for the client? Not that they should just go live, but what is a problem they can't solve physically that they could solve virtually, and figure out a way to, create that. And also just making sure that they understand that these are things that are happening more and more, like the era of the stage is almost over. so I think that them, having them realize that, I just talked to a client last week that never going to an expo again. It's a big company, billions, and their marketing person just said, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And that's the beginning of those companies not doing it. Apple gave up on that a long time ago. Go ahead, Bill.
So when I was in advertising for years, there were three terms that I had to learn and get comfortable with: reach, frequency, and impressions. And reach and frequency is how many people are you talking to and how often are you talking to them? Impressions are what are you leaving behind when you do those things? How many impressions are you making? So if you take that formula, how often are you reaching out to the existing client base and to the potential client bases that you're thinking, oh, this industry could really use us. Let me figure out if I can figure out some names, and gently and politely start building impressions with that group. What you're trying to do is get to the point when somebody says, I need, and then you enter the services that you're providing. The one name that I remember above all else is this guy or this woman or this service, and they will tend to either call you directly or at least put you in the mix of people to test.
And one thing that we did do while we were jump-starting things that we were doing is we did, Mickey mentions, do a lot of it and volunteer if you have to. We would take our equipment. If we weren't busy, we would go do it for a nonprofit or a friend or whatever, but we would knock it out. Like a whole bunch of us would put a ton of energy into it, and then we'd send it to other clients going, hey, look at this. This was pretty cool. But it has to be something that is worth doing. If you're going to do it halfway, it doesn't make any difference because you can't use it as a case study. But we'd work with nonprofits and say, hey, we need to be able to use all the behind the scenes, all the other things, and explain it to people. And most of them will say yes if you're going to do it for free or for less money. So then you can use those as case studies to try to explain it. But a lot of times you just have to show people what's possible. But the other thing to look at is just always remember that live streaming is a counter-cyclical business. So if we actually end up having a downturn globally or in the United States, you want to ramp up talking to people about it, because that generally, anytime the market goes into recession, live streaming accelerates, and that's been the case since 2000. Next question.
Sean Johnson in New York up next. He says, over the last few weeks, I have noticed intermittent quick black frames on panelists' video. Is this an NDI glitch? I have experienced this myself when using Zoom ISO. Any suggestions on how to fix?
Not an NDI glitch. We are some of the only people pushing, this, at least in our case, it's not NDI because we're not using it. But there is a way that we're requesting frames in our system that occasionally creates black frames. I don't know if I can go, I'm not technically capable of going into it any deeper than that, but we have had discussions with folks about it, and we're requesting, it's just the way we're requesting it and the speed at which we're requesting it has it get ahead of the cycle a little bit. And the simplest way I can explain it. It is something that has been reported and is working on. And it's something that, especially with SDI or HDMI, I think nobody else is experiencing except for us, just because we're the only ones doing what we're doing. So it wasn't a commonly known thing, but it is now identified. And we hope in the next couple of weeks, it'll be solved. All right. Changing subjects to our second hour, and we're going to talk a little bit about jobs. How do we prepare people for the next generation of jobs? How do we, prepare for the next industry, or preparing for any workforce, and this has been, this is kind of a common problem that a lot of people are having now, are going to continue to have and have had, pretty much for the last couple centuries you have a pinch where you need a large number of people that are qualified, and you can't actually generate that number of people. And I think it's a constant problem is that mismatch. I remember being working in a big effects company, and they were getting about 700 resumes a week. 700 resumes a week. They had usually 50 to 100 openings, and they could only find 2 or 3 per week, to hire, and what you have there is just a huge mismatch of skill sets to what you're trying to fit in. And that's and you see this all the time when, in almost every industry. Now, the thing that, and this is open discussion, so panelists, just go ahead and raise your hand if you want to say something here before we jump into the questions. But the thing that I've always approached, and for the last 30 years, is that I start building communities around things that I think I'm going to need, or things that I think that the industry will need, less than I need, but more that this is coming and we need more people to be able to do it. So how do we get together and build that up over time? When we go out and do recruiting, or we start hiring people from other companies, if you think about that at a human scale rather than a job scale, you would call that hunting and gathering. We're out there getting berries that are already there. We're out getting animals that are already there. That's hunting and gathering. And that's how everybody starts everywhere. And that's how we started as human beings. But civilizations are built on farming. And so the thing is we have to figure out how we are able to, we need to keep on thinking about this from a job perspective of how we develop people from the ground up, of I don't know how to do this, to someone who's we're going to get a much better group of people over time. But you have to start thinking in years and decades, not necessarily in weeks and months. And that's the hardest part, that and so you're hunting and gathering while the wheat is growing. But you have to figure that out, because we have to figure out how do we develop that. And it's what I did with physical teams in the 90s. It's what we did with Pixel Core in the aughts, and what we're doing now in office hours is how do we help people move forward from wherever they are. Some of them are advanced, some of them are beginning, and help them moving forward. And as imperfectly as we can, you're still trying to figure out how to actually do it. Go ahead, Nigel.
I think one of the hardest things at the moment, at least we're finding, is bringing in younger people to do work that people who've been in the job longer think is the right thing for them to start doing. And typically that means physical, dirty, difficult work for which they're not paid very much. And there just aren't people out there who want to do that, which is one of our challenges. So I think you have to reimagine when you bring someone in a very junior level, and think through how you're going to keep them interested, because the people who've been there for 20 years think they should spend 3 months or 3 years doing terrible jobs, and people just won't do it anymore.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I would agree also with Nigel about that. Dirty Jobs is probably one of the best TV shows for showing exactly where our decline in people that are working and what they want to do. It's not like what I do in video production and live sports production and such. It's not like anything we do is that crazy. We're not cleaning out septic systems. It's not exactly glory work, though. You are pulling cables and schlepping equipment here and there, but it's not the end of the world, and it's definitely in many ways rewarding that some people are always looking for that reward side of it. You're successful whenever you have a successful production and such. It's a great feeling. But I do feel like that the part that we're really fighting right now is that the younger people that we need in the business, in the industry, are just not interested. They just don't think this is a job and don't care. And I've had conversations with them, a few that were like, oh yeah, this is something after we talked, they're like, yeah, maybe not. No. But there's not enough people coming in order for us to call the people that aren't interested out and actually end up with people that are really interested in making this industry a living. And not everybody can be a YouTube influencer. And that's instant gratification at its worst right now.
Good, Bill.
Well, all of these things, I mean, I remember my history growing up and learning to do physical labor at some point. I think there's less of that. You know, esports doesn't give you the same training that real physical sports do. I played a little bit of JV football in high school. I did not take to it, but it did help me understand the necessity to put out physical energy over time. And I can't tell you how useful that's been to me through my whole career when I've had to get out and get cameras assembled on location. And I think if I hadn't had those days when I was going down the wrong path, but a useful path, I wouldn't be able to do the jobs that I did later where I had to think more, but I also had to physically manage more. I think this is going to be tough. I mean, generations get ready for what they see happening and possibilities for themselves. And I'm not sure that what they're seeing out there matches the jobs that are going to be, which is, I think, why the immigration issue is so difficult, because that often is where people come in who are willing to do the kinds of things that the people who see themselves as above those carry the camera for 3 hours jobs come from. So this is not just national, it is truly global, and we're seeing the effects of it everywhere around the world. I just think of the number of things I would go into right now that I'm looking to the future, and I would be sitting in a chair doing Swift programming or something if I really wanted to make sure I had a career ahead of me, because that is a coming technology rather than a dying technology.
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges right now, and we have to focus more and more on training than we did in the past, specifically because of minimum wage. You know, as minimum wage goes up, I can take less risks. So, you know, and it's not just the minimum wage, but the minimum wage goes up, and then all the stuff around it goes up, you know, that's there. And so what you end up doing is you end up requiring people to know more to hire than you did before. And so it's putting more pressure on training systems, because people have to come out further cooked than they did before. Because, you know, at first it used to be at, you know, $8 an hour, I just throw people at things, you know, like we'll just figure this out and we'll train them and they can be kind of useful and everything else. There's some point break. Now, I don't hire, I mean, in the events that I do today, I don't, you know, I think that we don't pay less than 20 or $25 an hour for the most part, 15 in some cases for long-term stuff. But for a day person coming in for the day, they're getting paid significantly more than that. So, so anyway, so that's a different, you know, structure, than what we typically have. But I think that puts a lot of challenge. I know that when Pixel Core was getting started, we had a lot of people that we bring in from students. They'd be interns, and then we, you know, oftentimes make them, you know, paid interns or paid production assistants. But those were minimum wage jobs, you know, and a lot of them, you know, and they were able to be minimally effective. You know, so while we were trying to figure stuff out, a lot of them now work at Facebook and Salesforce and Google and other places like that. But we weren't ever going to give them a chance at $15 an hour. And so I think that's it's a challenge, you know, for the industry right now is to not be able to figure that out, to make that work. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Peter Rosado in Las Vegas, Nevada has our first one this morning, and it is panel's thoughts on, and he's got a link there to a USA Today com story about remote workers returning to office jobs and as the market cools. So that's next.
Good, Nigel.
Yeah, so if I look out my window, if I could look out my window, I would see two very large office blocks owned by two very famous San Francisco or Bay Area based companies who you might think are going to be very much into people working remotely. When these office blocks are finished, my guess is they are going to have to fill them. They probably paid and got tax exemptions. They probably got all sorts of conditions to bring those people into the market, and they are not going to get away with leaving them empty. So I think you're going to find a lot of corporations will force people back into buildings because they are stuck with financial obligations. I think the second most important thing is, if you are more important to your company than they are to you, you have the rights and the privileges to do really work where you want. If, however, their paycheck is more important to you than they are, then you are going to do what they tell you to do. And that's just a reality I think people are going to have to get used to. Finally, I think remote management is really a management problem. And many people think it's about work. It's actually about a lack of training and understanding by the managers for how to motivate and measure and keep people who are remote enabled. I guess one more last point. If you're trying to build a career, out of sight can often be out of mind. So it's really hard to build a career if your boss or your boss's boss never sees you.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of people like in companies want to be at the headquarters because that's if you're trying to be upward mobile within a company, being near where the executives are does make a difference, as Nigel said. I think that one of the things that I think we're seeing with a lot of industries right now is, if you think about what used to be, like this, right? This is what the industry was. What COVID did was this. It ate away all of this stuff. So on the surface, it kind of looks the same. Might have eased it out, but all of this down here is negative space, and there's an enormous amount of pressure coming. This comes from events, from remote work, everything else is pushing down on this. There's going to be some point where it severs, and it's going to, that little thing overhanging is just going to drop off, and it may not happen all in one week, but it's going to happen. People are not going to keep working are not going to keep going to their offices the way that they did before. Even hybrid is really it's a fallback for these companies, that they can't get people to come every single day, but they can try to get them to come at least 2 or 3 days a week. And that's, if you look at that article, nearly half of the businesses are either remote or hybrid at this point. I imagine a lot more of them were fully, they're somehow trying to package hybrid into, well, they're coming back to the office. Well, they're coming back to the office some of the time, but I think that that's going to be harder. There's definitely jobs that you have to be at the office. They're highly secure, they're secret, they require hardware, they require, people working in labs, retail, all those things. But I think that you're going to find that talking to people that I know working at these companies, they really look at, and most of them are working remotely. If they got called back, it's not that they say that they're going to, this one has like, oh, you can't quit. It's not that they're going to quit. It's just they're now updating all of their LinkedIn stuff. They're flicking the little switch that says they're recruitable. They're looking at they get up in the morning having breakfast, looking at all the LinkedIn job opportunities that are showing up. They're applying for other things, and that's a horrible state for your employees to be in. If they're not happy with where they're at, and they're mobile, it just puts an incredible amount of instability on your workforce, and that makes it harder to do training. Because if you are, there's a famous saying, I don't know where it came from, that a CFO goes to a CEO and says, what if we train all these people and they leave? And the CEO says, what if we don't and they stay? So that you have to train people, you have to be bringing them up, and if they feel like they have upward mobility, you're gonna be in a much better situation. Upward mobility as well as some flexibility, and I think people now have a new sense of what that flexibility is. And I think that's where it's going to be very hard, is that they went from, the whole model, the game was you do K through 12, you do university, and you quickly move into a business before you realize that life could be a different way. And so you've had a very structured life since you were 5. And suddenly we had 2 years of unstructured, and, the people realized that they're spending a lot of their lives in their car. And I think that's going to be a hard thing for people to keep on getting over. Go ahead, Bill.
Also, I'm always mindful of the fact that disruption messes the people down the org chart, but it also messes with the people at the top of the org chart. A lot of these people who are CEOs, went through Harvard Business School, and they did all the right things, and they were conditioned to manage in a set of circumstances that are now gone, or at least under attack by all sorts of things. And they're flailing a little bit. It's like they understand this process where everybody's working in a big tower, and you can do all your communications internally, and you're going to put together the softball team to build all sorts of techniques to help run the organization. But then the bottom falls out of the way you used to do it, and you have to change the entire organization. It is not easy, and I don't think a lot of them have all the tools they necessarily should to think about it the correct way.
Yeah, the funny thing is that we deal with a lot of C-suite folks, and what we're always amazed by is how little they want to spend on their webcams. They just want to open up their laptop or jump on their iPad, and these are people who spend thousands of dollars on their suit and hundreds or thousands of dollars on their shoes and have the right car and have all the things, and they work out every day to make sure that they present themselves well in meetings. And because if you go to a C-suite on a Fortune 10 company, I mean, they oftentimes look like they're in another race of people. like they've been refined and they're manicured and they've built all this up, and somehow all the stuff that gave them those advantages have been taken away, and they're not replacing them with anything. They just want to jump on, and so they sound bad, they look bad, they're badly lit, and they just think that that's the way it is, and they don't. And now some companies have realized that the camera and the mic and everything else make a difference, and they're investing in that, but they can't the other ones can't figure out why their employees aren't listening to them. So they want them all to come back physically because they can't understand why they don't have the gravitas that they had before, when they could create that in their office. Like they could have an office next to them. There's the CEOs that are the most forward thinking in some of the really big companies have studios that sit next to their office. So their office is there, and there's a big old studio with professional level cameras and professional level switching and everything else. And that is a studio that sits right next to them. Literally, there's a door from their office to just walk into that studio. It's all prepped and ready to go, and they go in and do their presentations. And sometimes those studios look like a studio. Sometimes they look like a kitchen. Sometimes they look like they look like a lot of different things depending on what they want. And sometimes there's different walls that are a different way that they want to present what they're doing. And those are the ones that really understand it, that understand that they're projecting their image now through the screen, and I know we're getting a little off subject, but you have to have that. You have to start at the top and have people believe that they should follow you before you can get them. You can really attract them and get them working. Next question
comes from Paula Wallace in Austin, Texas. Again, what are the job prospects for over 65 tech workers? What skills would be most useful to learn? And can a 65-year-old plus person break into audio, video streaming, and so forth?
Good, Nigel.
So I'm not sure I know exactly what the best skills are to learn, but my guess for most of those people is you already have a set of skills. They're probably soft skills. They're probably skills that are around organizing. They're around understanding. They're around helping. And really working out how to utilize those skills may be the best thing you can do. I can tell you there is a market for people who can move the ball down the field, who can get things done, who can help other people achieve their objectives. So if I was, I guess I am at the higher end of the market in terms of age, I'm much more interested in people who can focus on that. I don't think they necessarily need to learn how to code. They can do, that's not a problem. But they've probably got skills. They've probably achieved things in their life. And I think most of us need those sorts of people around us.
There you go, Jeff.
Well, I guess my company is a perfect example. I have a 63-year-old that works in my company. I'm not 63, by the way, but he works in my company as one of my best employees, and he works circles around the 20-somethings that are working for me because he has the experience. And it's not that he's technically more experienced or has, it's just work ethic. And it's just something we're missing without a doubt. But I agree that anybody can learn, any dog can learn a new trick. And even old dogs still have plenty of time to work in the industry without a doubt.
Good, John.
One of the best techs on my team happens to be 65. Will be retiring here in the next couple of weeks. Really sad to see him go. One of the most knowledgeable, friendly, trains everybody else around him. Like, I would pay to have tons more like him than a bunch of people with lack of experience who don't have that customer service that he offers.
Good, Bill.
And as somebody who is well past technical retirement age and is still doing what I did 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 15 years ago, reasonably successful at it, the thing is, it's kind of a mindset. And, if you decide you're ready to, quote, retire, you're going to change your behavior to the point where you don't do the things that got you success in the first place. If you don't have that mindset, you're going to constantly be looking for new things to learn, new things to engage with, how to get ahead of the curve rather than behind it. And I just look around and I see people in my same age category and I go, man, they really look like they're old and giving up on it. And then I see another group of people who they're not. They're just not. So I think it's a force of will at some point to decide how long you're going to keep pushing and, you know, what's the appropriate level for you. And so far, I remember my mom hit 100 and was in pretty darn good shape. So thank you, Mom, for the genetics and the rest of that. But, you know, we see people out there who can be effective, can be robust, can be engaged way up into their 90s, and others who just can't. I don't know what the magic sauce is. Maybe it's genetic, but maybe it's something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we've done, and we've had a lot of folks that are, I mean, I've hired a lot of folks that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, and what they come with, what they arrive with oftentimes is an incredible base of knowledge, you know, that they can apply, and they know things that of where things came from and why we call things what they are. And a lot of them have been technicians out of ILM, you know, so these are folks that, you know, built, you know, wired up the first Steadicam for, you know, for Return of the Jedi. And, you know, but other ones were ones that, you know, had the first video beta cams in Asia and were working on it. And the knowledge that they have around all of those things, they've seen all of those things, and it just, some of it takes years to absorb. When you mix a handful of those folks into your team, wow, does it explode? You know, because you now have people with an incredible base of knowledge. And then you have a lot of young crew that are learning how to do it. And then you have the key people that are making sure that it actually goes through. And if you could have young folks that are learning how to do it, or new folks, I would say young, because they can be new up, you know, at any age. But you have core people that are going to be, you know, make it work. And sometimes the core people are these more, you know, advanced folks that have done this for decades. You know, when you can mix and match that, and it actually makes it a much more fun experience to be in. You know, and you know, getting people who are more experienced, there's an energy that people who are new and asking questions. The key, though, is to making sure that the people who are coming in that are advanced feel safe and also feel like they're ready to share and that aren't just bugged by everyone asking them questions. Because if they're curmudgeons and don't want to answer any questions or feel like that's somehow encroaching on their ability to get work, then we get rid of them. like that's not they're not useful to me. You know, part of the why they're there is to guide the new folks forward, to make that work. Go ahead, John.
Paul, one word: plastics.
I don't know if it's gonna work. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Do you think that as geographically distributed work becomes more accepted in more fields, the return to office wave will be a relic of the past?
Go ahead, Jeff.
The first time I read that, I actually, yes. Yeah, the answer to the question is yes. But the first time I read that, I actually was thinking more of our industry. We've been doing distributed workflows for years, well before COVID. And so for me, I just don't even think about it. There's still some people, some clients that we work for. Recently, I worked with Mark, for instance, on a show. Hey, we could do this remotely, save you some money for travel, etc. No, it was no conversation whatsoever. There are still plenty of companies out there that want people on site. And whether that's a live production or in the office, they feel like they just can't adjust to something new and they can't deal with it. So we have to make our changes ourselves.
Go ahead, John.
One thing I would make sure that we just think about and consider is when it comes into dedicated workspaces at home so people can segregate their work and home life. A lot of people aren't having that and featuring a lot of burnout that's coming from that, as well as creating spaces like we have in after hours where people can get together and it's not meeting after meeting to get communication happening. There's just a central spot we can jump in. If I have a question, someone can be there for me to help. Those are the things that I think that a lot of people haven't implemented. And there's a reason why you're seeing a lot of pullback into the office is you're not getting as efficient as you are next to each other if you're not leveraging or creating systems that kind of work together.
Good, Bill.
Also, in the creative arts, there's always been this on-location mentality, particularly about movie and content making, which is that we are all going to gather together in this remote location and we are going to work together side by side, shoulder to shoulder, to get this thing done. And then at the end of the job, we're going to go our separate ways. And I hope I see some of these people when we get together on another shoot or another project later, but you're never sure of it. So I think a lot of people who are really good at the creative arts have learn to accept that kind of temporary community that forms, gets the job done, and then goes away as just part of normal process.
It's such a superpower to be able to work with remote teams, because you're now picking people based on the best people that are for that job rather than the best people you can find in San Francisco or New York, LA. The production I'm doing one of the productions I'm doing right now, color is being done in New York. The audio is being done in the Philippines, in Manila. The edit is being done, I think it's Kansas. I apologize to the editor if that's not the right state, but I don't really think of it that way. I just think of the people that we needed for that job. They were, and I'm able to get the best people that I want to use, as opposed to the people. Now, there are we had to shoot it somewhere, so there were people that I needed, for that location. But even then, one of the things we try to build all of our systems so that they can be remotely accessed. So, I want to and this has not been since COVID. This has been since 2000, for me, 2012, 2014, when we started having it where we have experts. I just need to be I don't need an expert. Like on a sunny day, this system will work fine. On a rainy day, I need someone to reach into that and literally change the routing, change the thing, change whatever. And so when we get into that ability for someone to log in from Georgia or log in from Manila to fix some audio problem or to make it work, it's a very, very powerful. And it's just really hard to find it. So people who aren't thinking that way are really holding themselves back. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity to keep on getting better, but you have to figure out how to meet other people. And that's part of the tool of what we're using in office hours, is being on this panel, get you in front of people so people know what you know. Being in after hours or on the projects in the back end, let you work with people and let them know who you are and what you know. And that is, I know it's hugely useful for me. I'm looking for people, but it's also useful for a lot of other folks to figure those things out. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, says, had a few careers: electrician, welder, sonar tech, IT admin, photographer, videographer, cameraman, production coordinator, and live streamer. It always required going into some form of debt. How do we decrease that debt load for the kids coming up now?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't think it needs to include debt. That's the whole thing, is we need people that are just ready to work right now. All you have to do is email me. And that's it. Exactly. I'm being serious, guys. I'm being dead serious. It's like, we just need people to show up and want to learn. Yeah. That's all you have to do. You don't have to go to school to learn something in order to get a job. There are plenty of places that you could go get a job and have a very good career, a very capable career, something that pays well, which is not always the motivation, but still you could have a very good career just getting started and just applying to businesses that are looking, whether they're in your area or not in your area, it doesn't matter. You just have to apply and just say, hey, I'd like to learn this.
There you go, Bill.
I do think that the internet and the connectivity of the globe and all the people in it and they're being able to be found and addressed has changed a lot of the fundamentals of education. You used to have to go to a building, pay a lot of money to get access to the professor, whoever that was, and the rest of that. And now there's so much expertise that's distributed across the internet through all of these services. And everybody here knows what they are. And so if you are self-motivated, and if you have an interest in something that is marketable, all the information is out there. It's just up to you to marinate it, learn it, and then make that contact with somebody like Jeff, who is looking for you. And so you can do it around that system. I'm not saying there isn't any value in traditional education. There still is in some areas, but it is not the necessity that it used to be in terms of getting gatekeeper access to the information you need to build a career.
Yeah, I didn't, getting started, I didn't really, a lot of those were debt in a different way. I wasn't making money. I just was willing to volunteer. How I got into computer graphics was I walked into a company that sold electric image and Form Z, which was back in the 90s, was $7,500 and $2,500 or $3,500, and I couldn't afford that, so I just said I'll answer questions for free if you let me give me access to the computer, and so I sat there every weekend and nights and everything, just learning how to do it and learning how to figure that out, and that's what got me to Lucasfilm. So, but I didn't borrow money. I just spent a lot of time, on it. So I think that you can definitely do those, but you have to be willing to volunteer in certain areas. And again, we provide a lot of those opportunities here to get involved with things that are already happening, to kind of figure out, what's going to be next. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think a lot of people also learn a lot in house of worship. If you can find a large house of worship near you, there's a lot of great equipment, a lot of real world experience, and usually always looking for volunteers. I think that is a great place to kind of plug in. You'll also find people who maybe be doing this professionally, and then can find a person like Jeff who's looking for help, and you can kind of move up through the ranks that way. Anything to get your hands on the equipment that you're going to be using professionally is going to get you way further ahead than anything that you're going to learn in a classroom setting.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell when I'm working with folks in house of worship, I've been brought in a couple of times to look at a house of worship of all different backgrounds. First thing I say is just get good equipment. It's worth it. It's worth every penny is to get, good cameras and good, you want to save money on the hardware, but I'm like, what you save on the hardware, you pay for in not having as many volunteers. Like you give them a bunch of good cameras and a good mixer and a good, high end, what they feel is high end tools. And they come in and you have someone there that's capable of training them to use it and have them feel like they're successful. You'll have a long list of people who want to play there. If you get a lot of the least expensive things possible and put them in the back, it's a lot harder to get people to show up every Sunday or every Saturday or every Friday, depending on what you're doing. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri comes up with this one. How would someone change careers into tech or video production when they're currently in an unrelated job field?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, okay, so I'm going to do two sides of this. First, if you're passionate about it, you need to just find contacts, get around the people who do this kind of stuff, spend all your time online trying to build as much expertise as you can, that eventually you're going to get in front of somebody, you can demonstrate your expertise, and that's kind of how they first give you an opportunity. Parallels exactly what Alex said. He built expertise first, then he put themselves around people in that industry, and they recognized his expertise and brought him on board to contribute. The other thing, though, I'm going to say is that self-assessment is also very important. I can't tell you the number of guys when they found out that I was a producer of video work who said, I've always wanted to do that. And I'd say, well, here's the kind of a thing that you can do. Go get a camera and shoot some stuff. And I would come back, see them a year later, and I said, what camera did you buy? Oh, I'm still trying to figure out what camera is going to be best. I'm spending all my time online, and I'm looking at the Canon, I'm looking at Sonar. And, I just realized they are unable to commit. And if they had a year before, instead of worrying about whether the Sony or the Canon was the best camera, if they had just bought a camera and went out shooting, they would be a year ahead in learning to do that job. So they had this form of paralysis by analysis where they thought about what they were going to do instead of just doing it. And they didn't have a tolerance for making mistakes and growing through them. And I would say to myself, they are never going to make the transition into this job. Their skill set doesn't fit. So if you do have a skill set that fits, go for it, but be ruthless in your self-analysis and say, if people are telling you you're not detail-oriented, then you probably do not want to be in one of the fields here where you must be detail-oriented to succeed.
And I need to tell one story about that, just from what Bill said. It relates to me and my daughter. I have an Mbira. I don't know if it's around here, but I have this. It's a little thumb piano that comes out of Zimbabwe, and I bought it, and it's authentic. And I got a couple lessons, and I know how to play a couple traditional songs on it. And I kept on, but then it just sat for years on my desk. As a reminder of I could go play this, but I just didn't get around to it. My daughter on a Saturday picked it up and started banging on the keys until she realized what the chord structure was, and then just started playing pop songs on it. like within the time she picked it up to the time that she was playing songs that I recognized was like 4 hours. And so and it was just such a lesson for me to not get stopped by feeling like I have to be ready for something or I have to take lessons and just pounding it out. Now she has a lot of technical skill when it comes to music, so she understands what she's looking at. But still, I was kind of amazed, and I was like, "Oh, that's a real call to the field." Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't have a long story to tell. I just have a simple thing: is reach out to somebody in the industry. That's it. All you have to do is reach out to somebody in the industry that's looking to hire, and you'd be surprised about how available they would be to help you, steer you, mentor you to get the right direction that you need to go. There's nothing wrong with switching fields, nothing at all. And the information, the base information is out there, and hopefully you will have somebody that you could link up with that would be willing to take you on as a Padawan or intern type to help bring you up to speed. It's just being there and eager to learn.
And the main thing is don't underestimate the power of just being around the conversation. So PA is a great job because you hear a lot of things, you hear people talking, be useful, be in the right place at the right time, and a lot of times a lot of people start as PAs, and it's not because you're going to learn how to move things or do things, but a really good PA becomes a coordinator, and a really good coordinator becomes a producer, or becomes a teleprompt operator, or becomes a camera operator. But you have to hear the conversation and understand what's actually going on. When you come in as a PA, we have very low expectations other than you're going to be quiet. You're going to be ready and alert when we look at you, you better be looking at us, and you're not, fiddling with something. You're not on, not on Facebook, not on other things like that. You're attentive. You ask questions, but only when it's comfortable to ask questions. You're not asking them all the time. And you are, on time, assertive. Those are like basic life skills. Like that's all we expect from a PA is basic, strong life skills. That's the easiest way to get into the door. And then people like you, and then they go, "Oh, I'm going to hire that person again. I'm going to hire that person again," and you may spend time as a PA, but it's a really great place because you see a lot of different parts of production, and you see those things. Now, the way I've always gotten into industries is to find a way to serve that industry. So I'm interested in this thing. I want to get there, and I'll do it for free. And I'll figure out a way to do it. I had there was a guy we were doing a production in Minneapolis. And this guy had the craziest jib I've ever, not jib, a technocrane. He had a technocrane. And I asked him this is just another approach to this. I asked him what has he done in the film industry? He goes, "Oh, I don't know how to do any of this." He said, I've retired. He's in mid 30s. And he said, "I retired, and I felt if I got a really nice technocrane that people would just bring me onto set so I could learn how to use it and learn how to, this is the thing I wanted to do." And he, by the way, he invented these little strips for your nose. So he didn't have to work anymore. But he had this big old red technocrane or whatever it was. And sure enough, people bring him on to little films all the time because it was free. It's free to have a technocrane. And he got to learn. I haven't followed up with him. I should find out if he's still in it, but it was what he was passionate about. So getting something that everybody else doesn't have is another way to look at that if you can afford that. PAs are great to get started. I bought a Sony F950 in 2005 for a lot of money, $85,000 used, and I got into a lot of productions because of it, because it was the only 444 camera in Northern California. So there's a lot of, if you can do something special, you can also, get yourself invited, but people still have to know it exists. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, up with the next one. I've had a lot of push from a university contact about taking unpaid interns. I personally won't take an intern unless I can pay them. Is it just the local university, or is this an industry-wide standard of not doing paid internships?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful in different markets, different parts of the world. Paid and non-paid becomes an issue, and you need to pay people for their time. In principle, I would always tell you to pay an intern. If you don't pay someone, then nowadays you get exactly what you've paid for, which is not very much. But I do know that there are many universities and many educational establishments that are really desperate to give their people work experience, because they think it will give them a competitive advantage when they go into the market. So some of them are offering, free intern, on the boundaries. I would avoid that. Always pay the people that work for you. But it's a great way to get young people in if they're willing to work.
Good, Bill.
The university is selling a product. That product is education. They've been asked by people, how do I get real world experience? Trying to place interns is the way they're satisfying their marketplace. for real world experience. And they don't care about the financial part of it. They just want to be able to say on their website, you have a chance of getting a real world experience by coming through our educational program and paying us to help you do that. It's overt, it's open. That's how it's been going on for a long time. But I agree with everybody that, most of us who are in production get somebody sending something into our structured organization who knows nothing about anything and bringing them up to the point where they can be useful is a cost. So taking on an intern and not paying them because they've demonstrated that they can bring value to the set is a risky thing. And a lot of sets just won't do it. I don't want anybody on my set that isn't going to contribute, period.
Go, Jeff.
I've had a lot of experience with this over the years, more in the production side, sound and lighting production side. That was a very common thing a friend of mine was doing, and I could never get my head around it. Why would anybody show up and work for free? Because they were working. They were like doing rigging and stuff and lighting setups and such that was much more labor intensive than our video world. But any interns we've ever had, we call them part-time employees because that's what they are. Where they're making us money because they're being productive, and we're training them in a way that they are productive. We're not just having them sit and watch.
Yeah, we've definitely. I know with PixelCore we had a partnership with Sonoma State, and we would bring people in, and they were unpaid interns, and then we would typically convert some of them to paid interns. So basically, once they finish now they're getting graded on it. They're getting credits for it. They have to get credits for it, by the way. Like, so for this to happen, you have to figure out what the structure is. It's not that people are just coming and working for you for free. They're coming there and they're getting they're getting credits for that experience. And so that is part of their curriculum, and you are providing them a service to do that. They're not working for you for free. You are giving them a place to learn, and learn pretty much what they can't learn in university, because the reality is the universities are not built for giving people production experience. For the most part, some of them are. Some of them do a pretty good job of doing films and having them, NYU and other ones, the Tisch School is going to send them out with cameras and so on and so forth. But there's still something about working in the real world that is going to be different than those types of environments. And so just nugging through it and learning what it takes to do menial jobs and put those things together. But what we would do is oftentimes we would bring in 6 to 8 folks from Sonoma State. They'd be unpaid interns. At the end of that, we oftentimes hire some of them, 3 or 4 of them, as paid interns. And then they became, some of them would become production folks for us. And that was a pretty successful model for us to find new people. So it is a pretty, it's not them. Again, remember that they're not just working for free. They're getting credit, for that. And it's part of their school. And if they're not working for you, they're going to work for somebody else because they need those credits, and they can't get the credits without actual industry experience, because that's how the structure, and it's very smart for schools. I mean, in my opinion, the way to teach people production is I wouldn't bother, I have a bigger dream, which is to build something that costs a fraction of the cost and keeps people not working on projects for other clients, but working on projects for other people that are watching them. And so that's, but I think that trying to figure out a way to lower the cost of learning how to do this is a key for our industry. We have to get past someone having to spend $100,000 on an education that they could have learned on site, and so this is the in between. And I think that one of the big things that isn't fair is that people have to go to university to get the internship. I think that that's in the way our labor laws work right now is a huge advantage to college attendees, as college students, as opposed to uncolleged students, because they get to do the unpaid internships. They get that foot in the door that you can't get otherwise. And it's not fair. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Again, what jobs will still remain in fully robotic factories with humanoids walking around?
Go ahead, John.
The people installing the robots, fixing the robots, and programming them.
For a while. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
That was exactly it. Somebody's got to program it. We always had a joke in the club days is that you put up intelligent lights, but you still had to tell them what to do. So are they really intelligent? Not really.
I mean, the issue really is that there's still a lot of limitations to what a robot can do, and I think we vastly underestimate what our brain and our mind does, and I think that people who keep on telling us that the robot overlords are going to be there, and that doesn't account for any kind of, you lose a bunch of power, and now what are you going to do? So there's a lot of things that I think that I will say that I often tell people that if you say your job is mindless, then you better get a new one soon, because that job won't be around. So mindless jobs that are just rolling through it, those are probably going to go away. You're probably right. But the ones so you want to keep on thinking about how you and your kids and your family are doing things that hurt your head. You have to think about, and that are you have to learn every day. Those are the things that stay relevant. You're absolutely right. The things that you can do a lot of different things while you're doing it probably are not the things you want to get paid for. Next question.
Next one from Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach. And here on the panel, these days we find more jobs available in the consulting space or gig economies. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this type of job versus, say, a job with a W-2 or salary?
Well, the stability of a salary is nice, but you always want to be careful of that. That's the stability can suck you in and keep you there, because it's hard to give up that that constant income. So. But I think that's the big advantage. The having your own company or your own ability to do gig work lets you scale your income much more effectively if you can get out there and do it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, also, this disassociation of jobs from geography, I think, is going to continue apace. I can't tell you the number of people I know I'm really shocked at who have considered moving offshore from the United States to someplace. We're talking about Bernie, our friend who's a longtime Los Angeles grip truck owner and things like that, who's in Turkey now and having a great time. And I'm seeing all his posts. And even though he was in a job where you think you need a physical asset and a physical place to survive, he decided that at this point, when he was going into retirement, that he could move into a different part of his career, and he didn't have to be any particular place. I know that I'm sitting in San Diego. I could be sitting any place on the planet and do what I do day in and day out. And I think a lot of people are realizing that, and that's why Alex has talked a good little bit about the migration into places that have less cost of living, as long as they have high-level connectivity, and it presents more options for more people to work out of more places. I do think that's going to be a trend that's going to keep going for the rest of human history.
I work with a lot of folks that are working out of their apartments. They're working out of, they're somewhat mobile. They're living in the middle of the country. There's a huge advantage, to if you can get a hold of that kind of work, to work as much as you want, but be able to turn it on and off. You don't have to show up somewhere just to show up. So and Roscoe points out 401k matching. As someone who's never really done 401k, I don't have a consciousness to it, but I know that's a key advantage of having a job for a long period of time. I think that the flexibility is what most people go for. Is what they want, is to have that flexibility. You just really have to keep your ducks in order when it comes to how you're going to manage your money. The people who do this the best, in my opinion, are people who are putting a lot of money away. They're very conservative. They know they can take 3 months or 6 months or 8 months off and still have enough money to keep paying the bills, and they keep their overhead low. A lot of them, in my experience, have moved to the middle of the country, and I think that we'll talk about this in the next question, but I think that we're going to see more as this becomes more competitive. You're going to see more and more people moving out of urban areas as this virtual work happens, where they can get into something where it's much more cost effective. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No problem. I think to kind of miss the biggest advantage versus disadvantage is lack of stress. So if you're working for yourself or always hustling for that next gig, that next job, it can be stressful. I've been doing it for 35 plus years, and it does wear on you at times. It's very rewarding whenever it all happens, but for those that are just out there thinking that they can just go out and automatically get successful and be successful and get success, it's not always this as roses and sugar plums as you think it is. And so it takes a lot of work to get to where some of us are. And at the same time, working for somebody, it's not bad. It's usually, a lot of times, it's pretty good to know that, hey, I've got a check next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Wall Street Journal says the hottest big city labor markets are in order: Austin, San Jose, SLC, Salt Lake City, Boston, Orlando, Raleigh, Nashville, Seattle, Denver, and Dallas. What makes these hot, and which of these will rise and fall in the list?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Well, I think proximity to barbecue is probably the common element of most of those, at least for some of them. And
It's important.
Yeah, it is important. And the reality, of course, is from my youth, I lived in the city I first lived in with my first job because that's where the job was. And I went to the city where the job was. I think what's different today is that we're finding a generation that will pick different cities to go live with because they fit their lifestyles. They may be music-based, they may be barbecue-based, they may be outdoors, they may be climbing, running, camping, whatever it is. And then they're going to look for a job near that, which is why all of those cities are actually not very similar, because Boston isn't necessarily like Austin weather-wise, but Boston has a whole bunch of things going for it, as Austin does. And so I'm watching, downtown Austin, Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, people building huge buildings because they're going to assume that people want to live in the city and then they're going to want jobs. And I think that's coming first.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I think the only reason Boston is on that list is because it sounds like Austin, and most people are wanting to go to Austin anyway, since it's the top of the list, right? But you notice there are two cities on there that are Texas cities, and I find that really fascinating, myself being a Texas bred and born. I think that the majority of people are doing exactly what Nigel says. They're going after weather, they're going after climate, they're going after things that are where they want to live, is what they envision how they want to live. And then they get here and they feel the heat, and then they may want to move further north at that point in time. But barbecue is definitely high on the list too, and we do have a lot of it here. I feel like that the tech push into Austin is dragging also Dallas with it at the same time, because they're so close. They're only 3 hours away from each other. So that's one reason why Dallas is probably on the list. And Dallas actually has had a very large tech corridor for quite a while, with NCR up there and a lot of other IT companies that started from that area. But I feel like that my brother lives outside of Austin, and the growth I've seen in the last 2 years is just unbelievable. And this is all post-COVID. It's unbelievable. It's like little California there now, but hopefully those things would change that they brought over.
Go, Bill.
It's interesting. I've noticed a thing, and I'm calling it locational parochialism. I remember in some of my travels really being surprised, and my understanding of the world was enhanced. Like when I was on the subway in London once, I remember looking across the car, and there was a gentleman sitting there, and he was a Sikh. He had a turban on, but he was in a probably $2,000 suit. And I realized we were heading toward the city of London, and he was obviously an executive down there. I had not connected those two things, his grouping in society, if you would, and high finance. I did them. If I'm in a smaller town, and I've noticed this with a couple of my friends who've moved from bigger urban areas to a smaller town, both things get affected. The person coming in brings more big city to the small town, but the small town also starts affecting the person who's coming into that. And they start, with the Chamber of Commerce and whatever, and everybody's talking about different topics or different things. This is a baseball town. This is a football town. If I'm a football guy and I move to a baseball town, am I going to switch? Am I going to start talking baseball in the bars? Because that's what everybody in the bars are talking about. Right. It's just interesting for me. And I'm not saying it's good or bad or different, but this distributed moving to smaller places, it may be like what Gerta said about you look into the abyss and the abyss looks back into you. I think it's changing all of us. And this is unsettled for me at this point, how much of an impact this has on your life for the rest of your life.
And I still think that a big piece of this is going to have to do with available bandwidth, and the competition of where that is. I think that it is not hard for most of the country, by geographic, not by population, but most of the country, to become very competitive with many of these cities by just making sure that fiber gets out to everyone. If as people get 1 gig, 2 gig, 3 gig, 5 gig, I think AT&T is now offering 5 gig in some places. Fiber. As people start to do more of that, and as it starts to become more symmetrical, I think you'll see more and more people able to take advantage of that. And I think when people start when they're young, they really want to be in a city where everything's moving and happening. As soon as they start having kids, like for me, I was in Nob Hill on top of a building in a tiny little apartment. That's all I could afford. As soon as my son started walking, we were like, okay, it's time to move out of the city. Like it was, we needed to move somewhere we could have more space for the same amount of money. And I think that that's where, so it just depends on where people are in their family orientation as well. And I think that it's going to change the United States dramatically as bandwidth gets out to further and further out away from the urban areas. Because right now it's been mostly focused there. But if it gets into more and more small areas where people have low latency, high reliability, high speed internet, is probably going to make more of a difference into the makeup of this country than almost anything else that we could do. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Access to gear versus access to an internet interface. Will the latter continue to be the way production goes?
Go, Jeff.
Absolutely. If you ask me, internet is first and foremost, without a doubt. Good connection, stable connection. It'll be more valuable than any kind of gear you put in.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what we're trying to do with this show, it's really, we're not the answer yet. We're trying to figure out what that answer is, and we're having a lot of people figure it out. But what we're moving towards is how do we build global teams, that are just interfacing with how do we build it? How do we make it more simple for someone to run the show? How do we, but then have people who have enough practice, but we want to be able to choose people based on their skill, not based on their physical location. And we're going to want to do that over and over and over again. So anyway, so it's going to be interesting how this all pans out. But I think you're absolutely right, Jeff, that it's going to be access. I mean, at least at the first step. And I mean, there's always going to be need for people to be on the ground shooting stuff, but that need is going to keep on. We need less and less people to do that. And like our standard operating when we're shooting now is we have parts of the crew that are all online, that are watching and managing things. We don't need to have them all there. In fact, we look at equipment now. If it doesn't have some way for us to control over the internet, we're like, I don't know if I can use that. So, all right, good conversation. I wasn't sure. I'm always like, Mondays I always see these conversations. I go, we'll see how this goes. So anyway, really, really great set of questions from the producers. Thank you so much for keeping the conversation going. Thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. It's great to have your knowledgeable input on these questions. And then thanks to the crew, once again, a global crew looking at a computer interface, making this happen every single day, 7 days a week. So we really thank you for your contribution. All right, now we're going to jump into After Hours. I was trying to think something to say, but I don't have anything to say. Set up. But I am thinking about cities with barbecue. Barbecue. I know the county line barbecue isn't the best in Austin, but I still go because when I was learning how to do computer graphics.
I have to correct myself. I said that was Goethe. It was Nietzsche. I totally messed up the quote.
We're going to cut your pay in half.
Thank you for only cutting it in half. The abyss is still waiting for my paycheck.